Western Ag Network on the road in Moscow, Idaho for the American Lamb Summit, brought to you by the American Sheep Industry Association.
Well, lamb checkoff dollars are used to help promote all segments of the industry and to increase demand for American lamb. This week here in Moscow, Idaho, the American Lamb Board is hosting the 2025 American Lamb Summit, where the conference is covering some very important topics to increase the competitiveness of delicious American lamb. And our coverage this week is sponsored by the American Sheep Industry Association, powered by producers for producers since 1865.
Be part of something bigger. Join the American Sheep Industry Association today. Producers who join their state sheep association automatically gain ASI membership and access to national resources and representation. If your state doesn't have an association, no worries. You can still sign up individually at sheepusa.org and stay connected to the future of the industry. Your voice matters. Your membership counts. Again, learn more at sheepusa.org.
Well, joining us now here in Moscow, Idaho, is the chairman of the American Lamb Board from St. George, Kansas, Jeff Ebert. And here we are in Idaho. We're out in the West for this third installment of the American Lamb Summit. The first one took place in Colorado, number 2 in Michigan. And you folks at the American Lamb Board truly are excited to bring this summit out west. Talk about that.
Yes, we definitely are. It's very exciting to come out where, a lot of our big producers are in our industry, and to bring people from all over the U.S. I think we've got people here from 15 to 20 different states represented. And yeah, it's exciting to explore the Western range operations and see what we can learn from them as well.
Absolutely. Now, the theme of this year's American Lamb Summit is increasing the American lamb industry's competitiveness. Walk us through what's going to happen this year here in Idaho.
Well, and obviously everybody wants to be more competitive and increase numbers and whatnot, but we're seeing a lot of new people into our industry, and we want to help them develop a marketing plan and just grow their operation so that they can be successful in the sheep industry.
What was the idea behind these summits? The first one, as I mentioned, in Colorado, the second in Michigan, which, by the way, both of those were tremendously successful. I mean, the idea is to use these lamb checkoff dollars for a lot of different things throughout the year, and this is just one example.
Right. The idea, basically is to increase production numbers, but also increase, marketing share, take back some of that, the reduce the number of imports that we see as well. And I know Stan Potrotz from Premier was the one that kind of got this started, and he was modeling it after Australia and New Zealand, and trying to just get our industry together, all segments of the industry, packers, feeders, producers, and try to grow our industry, even at 1% at a time. So.
Well, I mean, the interest is there. I mean, folks can't necessarily see it right as we do this interview, but it's another jam-packed conference room. And so all segments of the sheep industry are once again represented here in Moscow, Idaho for this third installment. And so the interest truly is there.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and like I said, we've got people from all over the U.S. here, and to be honest, Moscow's not the easiest place to get into, travel into, but we were very blessed to have well over 100 participants here, and I know there's still people coming in, and yeah, so it's just exciting to see both older producers and a lot of younger producers that are here for the summit.
Well, just like other segments of agriculture, Jeff, I mean, there's always the peaks and valleys in the sheep industry, and you and I talked about it in a previous interview. Unlike the cattle inventory nationwide that's seen tremendous contraction these past couple of years, in that January 1st sheep inventory report, Albeit a small increase, it was good to see the sheep numbers on the
It
rise.
it definitely was good to see, and you know, we get those reports, and if you talk to people in the eastern U.S., they say there's no way those numbers are right. There's a lot of sheep that are being missed because they're going to direct marketers, they're going into the ethnic trade. So not only did we feel like we saw that 1% increase, but we also think there's numbers out there that are being missed, and yeah, there's just a lot of excitement in the sheep industry.
Well, and that's not to say it's not all young producers, which we're very happy to have young producers getting into the industry. It's folks of all ages that are wanting to be part of this wonderful industry and get more engaged with it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, I've personally have put a couple of 50-year-olds into the sheep industry just in the last couple of years. You know, so yeah, we're seeing people of all ages, you know, decide, and we're seeing cattle producers that are adding sheep as a second species for multi-species grazing. So we're seeing a lot of growth in a lot of different ways.
When we talk about the American Lamb Board, and of course, again, one of the focuses here is delivering a quality lamb product to consumers across this great country of ours. I mean, that's something you folks as lamb producers take very, very seriously, and you want to increase that domestic lamb consumption right here at home.
Absolutely, and yeah, and you know, one of the themes of this is Summit is to have a more consistent product for those consumers, because that's probably been one of the challenges in the sheep industry is we have so many different breeds of sheep and whatnot. So you know, to get a more consistent product for the consumers in the meat case is very important.
Well, and the American Lamb Board doesn't stop with that ongoing promotion. You know, a lot of folks always say, "Where can I find that delicious American lamb?" You know, 'cause given the choice, they'll definitely take that over some of that import product out of Australia and New Zealand. And the American Lamb Board wants to help those consumers find that product being raised by producers like yourself.
Right, and that's, you know, an ongoing challenge is to get lamb into more grocery stores, into more restaurants, so people can find that American lamb. Literally, I just saw some slides from Maggie O'Quinn that talked about different consumer groups and different people, you know, and where we're seeing some growth, which is exciting to see different avenues that we can maybe pursue further.
How tremendously successful have those lamb jams been these past few years in some of America's biggest cities? I mean, bringing this high quality, delicious product to these consumers in these big metropolitan areas, and not just doing that, but having fun doing it.
Right. No, they're extremely successful. I personally haven't been able to attend one, but I will be attending the one in Denver in August. But you hear the staff talk about it, and they just say that the people that come to those, you know, are just so excited to be there, so excited to have American lamb, and then they become regular consumers of American lamb, and that's really the focus of those is to hopefully introduce, you know, people maybe that have never tried American lamb or have used it in a limited amount to increase their consumption of American lamb, and we're seeing that that's been extremely successful.
What else is going on at the American Land Board as you and your officer team and of course the rest of the board, you know, when you come together either in person or on conference calls? I mean, we've just scratched the surface, but I mean, you truly do have the hearts and minds of not just producers but consumers always at the forefront.
Absolutely, and we, you know, our main, you know, our three focuses are promotion, education, and research. We've spent a lot of money on promotion through the lamb jams and social media and different avenues. We just spent this morning and early afternoon visiting with a lot of extension personnel to see what kind of new avenues we can do for research to help grow our industry. And then education is an ongoing one that we're working with, you know, those extension personnel again to try to get, you know, because they said there's a lot of new people and they just need the information. So we're going to try to develop some handouts and to both to help the new producers, but also help our extension personnel help those new producers.
And I'll just kind of wrap things up here, Jeff, just saying you guys can't do it alone, and eventually you go off of the board, and you maybe just throw out an invite for producers of all ages to get more involved with the industry. Think about throwing their hat in the ring and becoming a board member of the American Lamb Board, and just getting more involved with their industry.
Yes, I mean it's critical. I obviously started out with my state association, was an ASI representative, got on the ASI board, and then I got nominated for the American Lamb Board, and yeah, I'm finishing up my last year. I'll go off in January, but you know, a small town boy from Kansas serving as chairman of the American Lamb Board, you know, I would have never guessed that. So I would encourage anybody, no matter where you're located or how big or small your operation is, to get involved in the industry, whether it's at the state level or with the American Lamb Board.
Well, we appreciate your time. I know it's a busy time to catch up with you here at the American Lamb Summit, again underway this week in Moscow, Idaho. Keep up the good work. And again, folks, if you have a question or just want to know more about the American Lamb Board and what they're up to and what your lamb checkoff dollars are up to, it's always right at your fingertips, really, by just visiting lambboard.com.
Are you new to targeted grazing and want to start or grow your grazing service? Targeted Grazing 101, Starting and Sustaining a Grazing Service Enterprise, is the practical guide you need. This how-to book draws on interviews with over 30 experienced grazers to help you succeed. And it's available either as a paperback or USB with discounts for bulk orders. Order today at cheapusa.org and start making the most of targeted grazing.
Well, as we continue our coverage from here at the American Lamb Summit underway in Moscow, Idaho, again, great representation again from all segments of the U.S. sheep industry. And joining us now from Montana is the president of the American Sheep Industry Association, Ben Lefelt. And gosh, Ben, this American Lamb Summit truly has grown into something really, really valuable for all segments of the U.S. sheep industry. And that's why the ASI is so supportive of events like this.
Yeah, we got to be connected as an industry. You know, we really focus on the policy side, production side, health side on the ASI, but you know, the meat sales and everything is really what drives a lot of our value for our producers. So we got to be connected on all these fronts.
Well, absolutely. And right here at this summit, we've covered a lot of different issues already, but getting more American lamb to consumers through policy is the driving force of ASI, and it has been since 1865.
Yeah, I mean, we produce lamb, produce numbers of lambs on the ground, and if you got the number of the lambs on the ground, get them in the shelves or on the table. So that's what this is really about. So we're doing our part, looking at where imports are kind of forcing us out of kind of that shelf space on the ASI side, and we're looking here at how can we make sure we're producing a good quality American lamb product that's got a label that we can promote, and the LB is really behind a lot of that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest questions that a lot of folks out there, not just on the producing side, but maybe more importantly, the consuming side, Ben, is like, how are these imports really affecting producers like yourself? And walk us through those imports, like from New Zealand and Australia, and of course the current trade situation, the tariffs, and hopefully at the end of the day, increasing that shelf space for that delicious American lamb that's produced by producers like yourself.
Well, you know, this ALB is collecting checkoffs from producers and point people all the way through our system. And our goal is to promote American lamb. So to help with that process, the sheep industry, instead of just promoting lamb in general, we're trying to make sure we put some regulations to combat some of these currency issues that we deal with between the American dollar and Australian dollar, slow down these imports. We're at close to 70% imports in the U.S. Well, we need a certain amount to fill the plates and make sure everybody has got lamb. but we need a quota on that. And so just recently, we're working really closely with the trade representatives in DC. They're at the table with Australia right now. We're getting that baseline of 10%. We're looking at that. What do we need to be effective as an American sheep producer? That's the message we're delivering to the trade representatives, and that's the message we want to drive home with them to make sure that right tariff quota is there, so our lamb gets on that shelf next to America, next to the import, so our consumers have that choice. We want to be there on the shelf.
How does that relate back to the prices paid to producers themselves? I mean, we're marketing lamb all year round these days, and we've had some upswings and we've had some pretty significant downswings. And right as it stands today, we're kind of right in the middle of the road. A lot of folks wondering, where's this lamb market headed with everything we've just talked about?
Well, our producers, just like all ag, is dealing with inflationary pressures. We're dealing with labor issues. So we've got to make sure that we're adding value to our product. So we want to make sure there's an ability to add value to make sure we're on a consumer base that can afford that. We can move that product. So that's really what we're looking at, is how do we make sure we keep the number of producers, we produce the lamb, but we also are competitive when in terms of dealing with the import side.
How does that relate to ASI's, one of your priorities is just increasing processing capacity. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I mean, the sheep industry actually saw an increase in numbers this past year, which is very, very positive, unlike what we've seen in the cattle industry these past few years. But increasing that processing capacity so we can process more U.S. sheep into that delicious American lamb is still a big priority.
Yeah, it's a big priority, and it's an issue. We've had a couple new lamb plants come online in the last 5 years here, and that's been great to see that. It's making sure we can keep that product not only moving in the door for processing of lamb, but making sure it's smoothly moving out the door, and there's consistency on those carcasses that move out, so that we can continually move and be predictable in those processing, so they don't have to go through these volatile swings. One of the things, we just got through some of the farm bill process with this reconciliation bill. Now we're dealing with a little of what's left of the farm bill. Sheep, lamb don't have any risk protection, no futures. So one of the main things we're getting in that bill is some language to make sure RMA can provide that risk support for our producers. That is very important. It's important for the entire chain. So it is a priority for ASI to make sure that language gets in. And we did have an LRP lamb at one point. Something like that needs to be in the system to help our producers and the sheep industry move throughout that lamb chain effectively.
What about, while we're talking about, the farm bill and other key priorities for the sheep industry, I mean, adequately funding wildlife services so that these predators like coyotes and grizzly bears and wolves don't put us out of business themselves.
Yeah, that's a constant battle. We're very appreciative of wildlife services and the value that they bring to our lifestyle and to producers in ag. And I think the cattle industry has understood that a lot more with the increase in grizzly, these federally mandated species that come back, change the ecosystem, and and we have to deal with predators all the way along. So it's an important part. Every time we go to DC in March, the Wildlife Services is given the credit they need and the support they need. They need more support, because it's just a part of the whole system as we change the ecosystem with apex predators. We need to make sure we're putting things on the ground so we can produce food and fiber for the country.
Well, as we do this program in Idaho in the latter part of July, another devastating wildfire season has been underway across the West for many, many months now. Talk about how sheep can really play an integral part in wildfire mitigation out here in the West, especially on our federal lands.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of value that sheep grazing brings to the U.S. So we just put out a new version of targeted grazing book, which looks at solar farms, looks at targeted grazing we do in Montana, where I'm at. We work on noxious weeds on large cattle ranches to, instead of spreading herbicides around, we'll use a biocontrol of grazing on that. And then also we have to look at the Forest Service. PLC and BLM are rewriting some of their grazing menus now with a focus on how important that grazing piece is. And sheep are an intricate part of controlling a lot of those potential areas that we're going to have large forest fires.
And I mean, we kind of got to make hay while the sun shines with this current administration, who has been a little bit more favorable towards ranching and our Western way of life than maybe some of the previous administrations.
Yeah, it's just an understanding of what we need to support our country. You know, it gets back to when you talk about America first, making sure you have the pieces in place to support yourself, number one. And that's what farming and ranching does. You know that in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Colorado are big drivers of everything else that goes on in the U.S. You know, our consumer base is outside of those regions, but you know, we're a big part of that base. And I think this administration understands that a little more than some others. It's still a struggle, so but we're working, forward for our producers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to wrap things up here, Ben. I know it's kind of hard for you and I to accept this, but the sheep industry is actually a lot bigger than just out here in the West. I mean, but seriously, like the American Sheep Industry Association is working hard on behalf of all sheep producers, not just those of us out here in the West, but across the entire country, because there are sheep flocks from California all the way to the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing a lot about that. That's really what I enjoy about this Lamb Summit too. You get a different group of type of producers. We just heard about a solar company that's potentially looking at putting in processing plants to help drive the number of sheep in their area to graze under their solar panels. So, that's a new and profound way to look at things. So if we can have those different things, it's not the traditional way. We got to embrace all of that in the sheep industry because there's a lot of changes that are happening. We got to be on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us here on this segment as we do it from the American Lamb Summit here in Moscow, Idaho. Hey, I can't forget to mention though, I mean, now's the time to get the 2026 American Sheep Industry Association's annual convention on your calendars. Of course, it's headed for Reno, Nevada next year at the end of January. So mark it on your calendar. Make plans right now to join us in Nevada for that fun and educational event. And you can do so and even find more information by visiting the ASI's website at sheepusa.org.
Sheep producers and industry members, save the date. The 2026 American Sheep Industry Association Annual Convention is set for January 28th through the 31st in Reno, Nevada. It's the one time each year the entire U.S. sheep industry comes together to share ideas, set priorities, and strengthen the future of American sheep production. From policy to innovation, don't miss this key gathering of producers, leaders, and partners. Get all the details at sheepusa.org.
Well, increasing the American lamb industry's overall competitiveness has been a top priority here in Moscow, Idaho this week at the American Lamb Summit. And one of this year's presenters is our new friend from Alabama, Maggie O'Quinn, who talked about the evolving meat consumer and marketplace positioning U.S. lamb for future success. What was your presentation? What was the meat and potatoes out of that from you and your company, Maiden Marketing?
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So first, a little background about Maiden. We are a meat-centric marketing agency. So we are in the business of increasing the value for meat to return more economic profitability back to producers. So we really consider ourselves champions for the value of meat. And we have been working with the American Lamb Board as a client for more than 15 years and really pleased to share with them, with the producers today, some hot off the press research that we just did specifically around the question, who is today's 2025 American lamb consumer? And so today I spent a lot of time unpacking who that consumer is and how we meet them where we are.
Well, let's talk about that 2025 consumer, whether it's this year and moving forward, because it probably looks a little bit different than what we just saw 5, 10, certainly 15, 20 years ago.
You're exactly right. The American lamb consumer is evolving, and we actually did this round of research in 2021, and just the difference in the 4 years since we were in the height of the pandemic then, it looks really different. So let me unpack kind of the primary difference is the 2025 American lamb consumer has a lot more Gen Zs. And when we say Gen Zs, these are the youngest group of consumers who are born after 1996. They are primarily, they are young, urban individuals. There are some children in the picture, but not really yet. And the Gen Zs are, they have not yet come into their full purchasing power, but yet they spend a tremendous amount of their income on food and on experience, the experience with food. So they're very curious about lamb. They love eating lamb in their home. They love eating lamb when they're dining out. And they're very adventurous eaters. And most of the American lamb consumers fall under this segment of our might and meat consumer segmentation called the connected trendsetters, which means they are digital natives. So we've got to communicate with them and take them on the journey towards increasing their American lamb purchases on their phone first. So we start by connecting digitally before they ever set foot in a store, but they still want to engage and have an experience in a traditional supermarket. They still shop at traditional supermarkets, but they're also very apt to purchase lamb online as well.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, considering, our you and I's age, I mean, and how, and we've been at this deal for quite some time ourselves, but I mean, just how we have to adapt as an industry, right? To get in front of that younger consumer who, as you just explained, is a very important consumer base for these sheep producers.
It really is, and I like to say to producers and any group, even the packers, anyone in the supply chain, we have to remember those of us in the meat business, we are not our target consumer. Sometimes we think we know because we know a lot about American lamb. We're champions for the industry, but that consumer thinks and acts very differently than we do. And the other thing about Gen Zs that's interesting is they are looking for an authentic experience. In other words, they are more apt to pay more for an on-pack production claim. And they're very curious to learn all about the producer point of view. They want to meet that producer. They want to know the producer's family. How is my lamb purchase impacting that producer's ability to pass his ranch on to the next generation? They're really interested in that authentic story. And that's where I think today the producers who are here at this particular meeting are really interested in moving the needle forward, moving the whole lamb industry forward, and the consumers that we're targeting are hungry to connect with sheep producers.
Which is really cool. And how important is like health and nutrition, especially to this younger buyer base that seems to me is going to be super important moving forward.
We are in a really fascinating time for all animal protein, but lamb is at the forefront of having a really positive nutrition story to share. There is an extreme amount of interest from these younger shoppers in health and wellness. How is lamb not only pleasurable to eat because of the taste, but it's also fuel for my body. So they're asking a lot of questions about. They want to know the number of grams of protein. They want to know specific amino acid call outs. And so we as an industry have got to double down and tell that positive nutrition story. And we've got to own protein. Lamb has always owned protein. In fact, it's one of the most bioavailable protein sources available, and it's right up there with beef and chicken. And so the more the industry can do a positive nutrition call out on pack or even on a QR code that links to the producer or the lamb brand's website to get that positive health messaging out there. Consumers told us they want to receive those messages on pack or on the website, just like they want to receive it from their medical doctor.
And I think it's really great that the American Lamb Board on behalf of those producer checkoff dollars is investing in this sort of market research and data that your company Miden Marketing is providing the entire industry. Without question, Maggie, there's a ton of choices at the meat case, there's lots of different protein in there. And what you were telling me is the lamb pie is actually getting bigger. And that's some very good news for these producers.
It is. It's exciting to see a time where consumer demand is at an all-time high. There's more interest than ever in the protein call out on pack. And the other thing I think that's really growing in lamb's favor is and we don't talk about it because it's hard to get this data, but the ethnic trade. And so there's a lot of consumers, and this popped in our research as well, that the heaviest lamb users, they skew very high Hispanics and also African Americans. And so there's a real diverse population here that is interested in lamb. And when we talk about all the different global flavors that are trending on menus, and now we're seeing that in the retail stores, I mean, lamb is in a real position to drive more growth. And you're right, Miden is in the business of helping make that lamb pie bigger. And we need that pull-through strategy to drive more consumers. And the producer's job is just to keep producing. You guys are the design engineers, so we just need to have more lambs available. And one of the things we're talking about is how do we make the lamb available 52 weeks a year, not just during the peak seasonality times of Christmas and Easter. And so a lot of the conversations we're having at this meeting is about growing that demand 52 weeks a year, because that's what the retailer expects. That's what the restaurant operator expects, is they need that consistency on menu and in their meat case to deliver what their shoppers are looking for.
And sometimes, Maggie, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because in a previous life, you spent a lot of time with another popular branded protein company or brand out there, one of the most well recognizable brands in the world, certified Angus beef. And when I say you don't have to reinvent the wheel, I mean the sheep and lamb industry, we can learn a lot from the beef industry.
You're right. You're right. There's a lot of lessons that lamb can learn from beef. And I want to emphasize that lamb is still different from beef, right?
Yeah.
It's its own unique supply chain. But you're right. I am passionate about creating the pull-through. And no other brand in the history of animal protein has created the pull-through the way certified Angus beef did. And it took decades to get to this point, but it really revolutionized incentivizing producers to produce a higher quality animal, and then exceeding the consumer expectations in the process. I think there's a real opportunity for lamb to follow suit in terms of produce what the consumer is asking for, and then the thing that's missing is how do we pay the producers more for that?
Well, it seems to me there's a lot of positive momentum, and there's a lot of exciting data to back what we've been talking about these past few minutes. We could literally spend the rest of the whole day doing this, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. But lucky enough, you can find this type of information and a whole lot more by visiting midenmarketing.com. Or Maggie said, you can also learn more by just visiting their LinkedIn page. Maggie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, and go lamb.
Absolutely. Go Lamb. Just again, one of the many highlights here at the 2025 American Lamb Summit here in Moscow, Idaho. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of On the Road from the American Lamb Summit here in Moscow, Idaho. If you're hungry for more information, though, like funding, events, resources, market reports, and a whole lot more, you can always visit lambboard.com.
Western Ag Network on the road in Moscow, Idaho for the American Lamb Summit, brought to you by the American Sheep Industry Association.